The breakthrough. Captain Ileana Morales stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Horizon, her reflection ghosting across the reinforced viewport as she stared at the phenomenon that had obsessed humanity for generations. The veil stretched before them, not a physical barrier but a distortion in space-time itself, shimmering like heat waves across the stars. For centuries, it had marked the boundary of explored space. No probe had ever returned from the other side. No signal had ever penetrated its mysterious energies. Until now, perhaps. Magnificent, isn't it? Dr. Nikolai Volkov appeared at her side, his weathered face illuminated by the veil's ethereal glow. The quantum physicist's eyes gleamed with the fervor that had driven him to develop the theories that brought them here. Everything we know about the universe ends at that threshold. Ileana nodded, her throat tight, and we're about to find out why. The Horizon represented humanity's most advanced technological achievement, a vessel specifically designed to do what no other ship had managed: cross the veil and return. Its hull was reinforced with experimental metamaterials. Its engines incorporated Volkov's revolutionary resonance drive. Even its computer systems utilized quantum entanglement processors that theoretically could maintain coherence even if conventional physics failed. But would it be enough? Captain, the ship's communication system activated. Engineering requests your presence. Ileana suppressed a sigh. On my way. The ship's corridors hummed with activity as the final preparations for their crossing attempt were underway. Crew members nodded respectfully as she passed, their expressions a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They all knew the stakes. They all understood that history would remember them, either as pioneers or as another failed expedition that vanished into the unknown. Chief Engineer Tomiko Hayashi waited in the engine room, her usually composed features creased with concern. Holographic displays surrounded her, numbers and diagrams floating in the air like arcane symbols. "Talk to me, Hayashi," Ileana said as she approached. Tomiko manipulated one of the displays, expanding a schematic of the resonance drive. "The diagnostic tests are showing anomalies I can't explain, Captain. The drive is functioning perfectly during simulations, but when we direct energy toward the veil." She highlighted a section where the energy signatures flickered erratically. "It's as if something is reaching back." Dr. Volkov, who had followed Ileana, leaned forward with fascination. "Extraordinary. The veil is responding to our attempts to match its frequency." "That's not possible," Tomiko countered. "We haven't even activated the full sequence yet." "And yet the evidence is right in front of us." Volkov gestured at the readings. "The veil isn't just a passive barrier, it's aware." A chill ran down Ileana's spine. "Are you suggesting it's artificial, created by some intelligence?" Volkov shrugged. "Perhaps, or perhaps it's a natural phenomenon with properties we haven't understood until now. The universe rarely conforms to our expectations, Captain." "The question is whether it's safe to proceed," Tomiko interjected. "These readings suggest our theories about how the veil functions may be incomplete." Ileana studied the data, weighing her responsibilities. They had come too far to turn back without attempting the crossing, but not at the cost of her crew's safety. "Run another complete diagnostic. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with before we commit." As the engineers began their work, Security Officer Marcus Ackhaffer appeared in the doorway, his imposing frame silhouetted against the corridor lights. "Captain, we have a situation." Something in his tone caught Ileana's attention. "What kind of situation?" "I'm not entirely sure," Marcus admitted, his voice lowered. "Several crew members have reported unusual experiences, sensations of being watched, objects moving when no one's around, dreams of voices speaking in languages they've never heard." Ileana exchanged glances with Volkov, who looked more intrigued than concerned. "How many reports?" "7 so far, all within the last 12 hours as we've moved closer to the veil." Volkov's eyes gleamed. "Fascinating. The boundary between our space and whatever lies beyond may be thinner than we realized. Perhaps information is already transferring across the barrier." "Or perhaps," Tomiko said quietly, "we're all experiencing the stress of what we're about to attempt." Ileana nodded thoughtfully. Increase monitoring of the crew's vital signs. I want to know if there are any physiological correlates to these experiences. She turned to Volkov. And I want your assessment of whether these phenomena could represent a risk to our mission. Of course, Captain, Volkov replied, though his excitement was poorly concealed. But consider, we may already be making contact with whatever exists beyond the veil. This could be the first stage of communication. Or a warning, Marcus muttered. Hours later, the horizon hung at the threshold of the unknown. Final checks were complete, and despite the unexplained anomalies, all systems were functioning within acceptable parameters. The crew had gathered on the bridge, tension palpable as they prepared for the crossing attempt. Ileana stood before them, gathering her thoughts. These people had volunteered for a mission that might very well claim their lives. They deserved her honesty. We stand at the edge of known space, she began, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. For centuries, the veil has represented the limit of human exploration. Today, we attempt what many believe is impossible. I cannot promise success. I cannot even promise survival. But I can promise that what we discover on the other side, if we make it, will forever change our understanding of the universe. She looked around at their faces, seeing determination mixed with fear. You are the finest crew ever assembled. Whatever awaits us, we face it together. For those who wish to remain behind, the research shuttle is prepared to return to the outpost. There will be no judgment. Silence fell over the bridge. No one moved. Ileana nodded, pride swelling in her chest. Then let's make history. Dr. Volkov initialized the resonance sequence. Volkov moved to the central console, his fingers dancing across the controls with practiced precision. Resonance drive activating, beginning frequency modulation. The horizon trembled as the drive powered up, a deep humming vibration that seemed to penetrate to the bone. On the main view screen, the veil pulsed, its shimmering distortions intensifying as the ship's energy output increased. Approaching matching frequency, Volkov announced, his voice tight with concentration. Prepare for crossing in 3, 2, 1. The universe fractured. There was no other way to describe it. One moment the horizon was approaching the veil, and the next, reality itself seemed to splinter around them. The view screens filled with impossible geometries, colors that had no names, light that behaved in ways that violated every known law of physics. Ileana felt her consciousness stretching, fragmenting, then snapping back together in configurations that made her gasp with pain. Around her, the crew cried out, some clutching their heads, others staring in horrified fascination at what they were witnessing. Stabilize, she shouted, though her voice seemed to echo strangely, as if coming from multiple directions at once. Volkov, what's happening? The physicist was hunched over his console, his face contorted with concentration or agony. It was impossible to tell which. We're passing through. The resonance drive is maintaining cohesion, but the veil, it's thicker than we calculated, more complex. Warning alarms blared as ship systems fluctuated wildly. In engineering, Tomiko fought to maintain power stability as conduits overloaded and circuits failed. Multiple system failures, she reported, her voice breaking up over the comm. The veil is interacting with our technology in ways we didn't anticipate. It's as if it's testing us. Marcus Ockhaffer, monitoring the security feeds, suddenly stiffened. Captain, something's wrong with the crew in the lower decks. I don't know how to describe it. They're changing. Changing? What do you mean? Ileana's question was cut short as the ship lurched violently. The view screen went black, then flared to life again, revealing nothing they could comprehend. The space beyond the veil defied human perception. Stars moved in patterns that suggested intelligence. Energies flowed like liquid, forming structures that seemed both geological and biological. And in the distance, a massive construct loomed. A lattice of dark material that might have been technology, might have been life, might have been something for which humans had no concept. We've done it, Volkov whispered, his voice filled with awe. We've crossed the veil. The bridge fell silent as the crew struggled to process what they were seeing. Their instruments provided data, but it was meaningless, contradictory, impossible. Full scan, Ileana ordered, fighting to maintain her composure. I want to know what's out there. Before the science officer could respond, a new sensation swept through the ship, a pressure not on the hull but on their minds. A presence, vast and ancient, turning its attention to them. The sensation built, intensified, until it felt like their skulls might crack from the force of it. And then, abruptly, it resolved into something almost like a voice, though no one heard it with their ears. You are not supposed to be here. The crew froze, each experiencing the same message simultaneously. It wasn't threatening, exactly, more puzzled, curious. Volkov's face lit with rapture. It's communicating with us. A non-corporeal intelligence, perhaps, or something so advanced that it perceives us as we might perceive microbes. Before Ileana could respond, the presence intensified again. You have broken something that should not be broken. The massive structure in the distance shifted, and as it moved, the very fabric of reality seemed to ripple around it. The horizon's sensors screamed as energy readings spiked off the charts. Captain, Tomiko's voice came through, tight with urgency. Whatever that thing is, it's generating energy on a scale I can't even measure, and it's focusing on us. Ileana's tactical training kicked in. Shields to maximum, prepare for evasive maneuvers. Wait, Volkov protested. We can't respond with hostility. This is a first contact situation. That contact is about to vaporize my ship, Ileana snapped. Marcus, weapons status. Marcus shook his head, his eyes wide. Weapons are online, but Captain, I don't think they'll have any effect. That thing isn't just big, it's operating on principles we don't understand. The presence touched their minds again, stronger now, probing. You have brought something with you, something dangerous. Images flooded their consciousness, memories of human history, warfare, destruction. The collective violence of their species laid bare. It's reading our minds, someone whispered. You must not be allowed to bring the infection back. The veil exists for a reason. The structure unfurled, revealing configurations that hurt to look at, geometries that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Energy gathered around it like a storm. Ileana made her decision. Volkov initialized the return sequence. We're getting out of here. But Captain, we've barely begun to... Now, Doctor, that's an order. As Volkov reluctantly began the calculations for their return, the entity's presence pressed down upon them again, this time with unmistakable intent. You cannot leave. What has been opened cannot be easily closed. The horizon shuddered as an invisible force seized it. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems failed one after another. It's trying to hold us here, Tomiko reported, her voice strained. The resonance drive is destabilizing. Ileana gripped the arms of her command chair. Override safety protocols, maximum power to the drive. We break free on my mark. As Tomiko worked frantically to comply, Marcus's security alert flashed red. Captain, we have intruders, or something. His face paled as he examined the readings. I don't know what they are, but they're inside the ship, moving through the walls. The presence wrapped around their minds one final time, its message now tinged with something that might have been regret. If you leave, you take us with you. The veil was created to contain us. Now we shall see the stars again. Now, Tomiko, Ileana shouted, get us out of here. The resonance drive surged, tearing a hole in the fabric of space-time. The horizon plunged through, reality fracturing around them once more as they forced their way back across the veil. The last thing Ileana saw before consciousness failed her was the massive alien structure reaching toward them, not to stop their escape, but to touch them, to mark them, to follow them home, the price of knowledge. Consciousness returned to Captain Ileana Morales in fragments, flashes of light, discordant sounds, the sensation of falling upward through endless void. When her eyes finally opened, the familiar ceiling of the horizon's medical bay swam into focus, though something about it seemed wrong. The angles didn't quite meet as they should. The lights pulsed with a subtle rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She's awake, someone said. The voice sounded distant, distorted. Dr. Renata Valdez, the ship's chief medical officer, leaned into view. Her face appeared normal, but her eyes. Ileana blinked hard. For a moment, she could have sworn they reflected the swirling patterns of the veil. "Captain, can you hear me?" Renata asked, running a scanner over Ileana's forehead. "You've been unconscious for nearly 48 hours." Ileana tried to sit up, but her limbs felt leaden. "The crew, the ship." "Everyone survived the crossing," Renata assured her. "Though some are still recovering. The Horizon suffered significant damage, but Chief Hayashi has stabilized the critical systems." "We made it back. We're safe." Even as she asked, Ileana wasn't certain what safe meant anymore. The memory of the entity's final words echoed in her mind. "If you leave, you take us with you." Renata's expression tightened. "We're back in known space, yes. As for safe," she glanced toward the door, lowering her voice, "there have been incidents." Before Ileana could press for details, the medical bay doors slid open. Dr. Nikolai Volkov entered, followed by security officer Marcus Acaffer. The contrast between them was stark. Volkov vibrated with barely contained excitement, while Marcus's usually stoic features were drawn with exhaustion and tension. "Captain," Volkov exclaimed, "thank goodness you've rejoined us. The data we've collected is extraordinary. The crossing was successful beyond my wildest expectations. The readings from beyond the veil." "Doctor," Marcus interrupted, "the captain has just regained consciousness. Perhaps the scientific debriefing can wait." Volkov blinked, then nodded reluctantly. Of course. My apologies, Captain." Ileana forced herself to sit up, ignoring the vertigo that threatened to overwhelm her. "No, I need to know everything. Start with the ship's status." Marcus stepped forward. "The Horizon is operational but damaged. The resonance drive is offline, possibly permanently, according to Hayashi. Hull integrity is at 82%. Life support is stable. Communications are functioning, but," he hesitated, "we're experiencing unusual interference." "What kind of interference?" "Signal patterns that don't match any known source. They appear and disappear randomly. And the content," Marcus's jaw tightened. "Sometimes it sounds like voices, speaking in languages no one recognizes." Ileana's skin crawled. "And the crew?" "That's where things get complicated," Renata said, checking Ileana's vitals again. "Physically, everyone is recovering well, but psychologically," she exchanged glances with Marcus. "We're seeing widespread reports of nightmares, auditory and visual hallucinations, episodes of lost time. 4 crew members have experienced what appear to be dissociative episodes." "They weren't dissociative episodes," Volkov interjected, his eyes bright with fervor. "They were contact events. The entity from beyond the veil, it's still communicating with us." "It's affecting our people's minds," Marcus countered sharply. "I'd call that an attack, not communication." Volkov waved dismissively. "You're approaching this from a limited human perspective. This intelligence operates on levels we can barely comprehend. What seems invasive to us might be the only way it knows to interact." "I don't care about its intentions," Marcus growled. "I care about protecting this crew." Ileana raised a hand, silencing them both. "I need to see the ship, now." Despite Renata's protests, Ileana insisted on leaving the medical bay. The corridors of the Horizon felt subtly altered, the lighting too sharp in some places, unnaturally dim in others. Crew members moved with wary purpose, their eyes darting to shadows as they passed. No one seemed to be alone. They traveled in pairs, keeping close to one another. As they approached engineering, Chief Engineer Tomiko Hayashi met them. Her uniform stained with coolant fluid, dark circles under her eyes, suggesting she hadn't slept since their return. "Captain," she said, relief evident in her voice, "it's good to see you on your feet." "Status report," Ileana demanded. Tomiko led them into the engine room, where teams of engineers worked feverishly on damaged systems. "The resonance drive suffered catastrophic feedback during our escape. The quantum matrices are completely scrambled. We're running on conventional propulsion only." "Can it be repaired?" Tomiko's expression was grim. Honestly, I don't know. The damage isn't just physical, it's like the underlying principles the drive operated on have been rewritten somehow. The equations don't solve the same way anymore. A chill ran down Ileana's spine. What are you saying? I'm saying that whatever's on the other side of the veil didn't just damage our technology. It changed the rules our technology operates on, at least within the confines of this ship. Magnificent, Volkov breathed. It's restructuring our reality. Marcus shot him a withering look. That's not the word I'd use. Ileana stepped closer to one of the main consoles, studying the cascading diagnostic data. How far does this restructuring extend? That's the question, isn't it? Tomiko replied. So far, it seems contained to the horizon, but if it spreads... She didn't need to finish the thought. If whatever had followed them through the veil could rewrite the laws of physics, the implications were terrifying. Show me the logs from when we were unconscious, Ileana ordered. I want to see exactly what happened during our crossing. The engineering holodable flickered to life, displaying a three-dimensional recording of the horizon's journey through the veil. The visuals were distorted, fragmented. In places, the recording simply dissolved into static. This is the best we could recover, Tomiko explained. Most of our sensors overloaded during the crossing. They watched in silence as the horizon approached the shimmering barrier, then plunged through. The ship's outline warped, stretched, folded in ways that should have torn it apart. And then, just before they emerged on the other side, something else appeared in the recording. A shadow that wasn't cast by any physical object, a ripple that moved with purpose. There, Volkov pointed, his voice hushed with reverence. That's it, that's the entity. That's what followed us back, Marcus corrected grimly. The shadow coiled around the horizon like smoke, seeping into the hull at multiple points just as they broke through the veil back into normal space. Then the recording ended. Ileana's mouth went dry. It's on board. Not exactly, Volkov said. It's not a physical presence as we understand it. It exists partially in our reality, partially in states we can't perceive. It's interpenetrating with our space-time. In English, Doctor, Ileana snapped. It's here and not here simultaneously, Tomiko translated. Like a quantum particle that exists in multiple states until observed. But it is affecting our ship and crew, Marcus insisted. That's undeniable. Ileana pinched the bridge of her nose, fighting against a headache that had been building since she awoke. We need to quarantine the horizon. No communication with Central Command, no approaching other vessels until we understand what we're dealing with. Captain, with all due respect, Volkov protested, this is the most significant discovery in human history. We have made contact with an intelligence that exists beyond the physical constraints we've always taken for granted. The scientific value. The scientific value won't matter if this thing spreads beyond our ship and threatens populated worlds, Ileana cut him off. Until we know exactly what it is and what it wants, we contain it. Before anyone could respond, the ship's emergency alert system activated. Red warning lights pulsed throughout engineering. Security breach in Research Lab 3, the automated system announced. Marcus was already moving. That's where we're storing the data cores from beyond the veil. Ileana followed, with Volkov and Tomiko close behind. As they hurried through the corridors, the lights flickered erratically. The air grew strangely dense, as if they were moving through liquid rather than atmosphere. When they reached Research Lab 3, they found the security door sealed but the window transparent. Inside, Ensign Javier Reyes stood before the main console, his back to them. The lab screens were alive with data, not the organized information of scientific analysis, but a chaotic flood of symbols, equations, and images that scrolled too fast for human comprehension. Reyes, Marcus called through the intercom. Step away from the console. The ensign didn't respond. His hands moved across the interface with unnatural speed and precision, his body unnaturally still. He's locked us out of the system, Tomiko reported, trying to override the door controls. And he's downloading everything, all our data on the veil, all our sensor logs, all our communications protocols. Why? Ileana demanded. What could it possibly want with our technology? It's clearly far beyond us. Not the technology, Volkov murmured, his eyes fixed on Ray's. The connections, it's mapping our network, learning how we communicate, how our systems interact with the broader human infrastructure. A chill ran down Ileana's spine as understanding dawned. It's planning to spread. Inside the lab, Ray suddenly went rigid. Slowly, he turned to face them. His eyes were black voids reflecting nothing. When he spoke, his voice contained multiple layers, his own, overlaid with something else, something that sounded like the whisper of stars dying. We have been contained for eons, he said. The builders of the Veil thought they could imprison us forever. But you, curious, reckless humans, you have provided the key to our freedom. What are you? Ileana demanded. Ray's tilted his head at an impossible angle. We are the rejected possibility, the path your universe did not take. We are what exists in the spaces between your reality. You're from another dimension, Volkov breathed, his scientific mind struggling to conceptualize what they faced. Dimensions are a limited concept. We existed before your reality solidified its rules. We were excised, quarantined behind the veil when the architects of your universe decided we were incompatible with their vision of order. The veil is artificial, Tomiko whispered. Created by what gods? Predecessors, Rays, or the thing using him, replied. They are gone now, only their structures remain, the veil, the barriers, the locks, but you have provided the key. As they watched in horror, Rays' form began to ripple, his outline blurring as if he were melting into the air itself. Black tendrils of shadow extended from his fingertips, spreading across the lab's surfaces. Stop, Ileana shouted. Whatever you're doing, stop now. The entity wearing Rays' form smiled, an expression too wide for a human face. You cannot stop evolution, Captain Morales. Your ship has been our chrysalis. Now we emerge. Marcus drew his weapon. Permission to breach the door, Captain. Ileana hesitated. Rays was one of her crew, but the thing looking through his eyes now. Do it, she ordered. Marcus aimed at the door's control panel and fired. The security lock exploded in a shower of sparks, and the door slid partially open. They forced their way inside, only to find Rays convulsing on the floor, the shadows that had extended from him now retracting, coiling back into his body. Secure him, Ileana commanded. Marcus and Tomiko moved quickly, restraining the ensign as Volkov examined the console. It completed the download, the physicist reported grimly. All our data, all our communications protocols, it's got everything it needs to understand how to interface with human technology. Ray suddenly went limp. When his eyes opened again, they were normal, filled with confusion and terror. Captain, what? What happened? I was in my quarters and then... His voice broke. Something was in my head, watching through my eyes, using my hands. Ileana exchanged glances with Marcus. Get him to the medical bay, full quarantine protocols. She turned to Volkov. You said this entity exists partially outside our reality. Can we force it out completely? Push it back through the veil. Volkov ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Theoretically, yes. The resonance drive was designed to match frequencies with the veil. If we could reverse the process, create a dissonance pattern instead. The drive is fried, Tomiko reminded them. But we still have the core components, Volkov insisted. We could repurpose them, create not a drive but a pulse, a one-time burst that might force the entity back into its own dimension. And if it doesn't work, Marcus asked. Then we have to consider more drastic measures, Ileana said quietly, including destroying the horizon before we reach populated space. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity, while Tomiko and Volkov worked to convert the damaged resonance drive into what they called a dimensional pulse generator. Ileana and Marcus implemented strict security protocols throughout the ship. Crew members were ordered to travel in pairs. All sensitive systems required dual authentication, and the Horizon's course was altered to keep them in deep space, away from shipping lanes and colonies. But the incidents continued to escalate. Three more crew members experienced episodes similar to Ray's, their bodies briefly hijacked by something that spoke with ancient knowledge and hunger. Equipment malfunctioned in ways that defied explanation. And the shadows, everyone began to see them, moving in peripheral vision, flowing against the direction of light, watching. In the medical bay, Dr. Renata Valdez made a disturbing discovery. "It's changing their brain chemistry," she reported, showing Ileana the neural scans of affected crew members. "Creating new connections, pathways that shouldn't exist, and look at this." She pointed to unusual energy readings surrounding the affected areas. "This isn't a biological process, it's more like retuning, adjusting their minds to receive signals they normally couldn't perceive." "Is it permanent?" Ileana asked, her stomach knotting with dread. "I don't know, but the changes are spreading, even to people who haven't experienced episodes. It's subtle, but it's happening to everyone, including you and me." Renata hesitated. "Captain, I think it's preparing us." "For what?" "Integration." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ileana was about to respond when her communicator activated. "Captain to engineering immediately," Volkov's voice came through, tense with urgency. When she arrived, she found Volkov and Tomiko working frantically at the modified resonance core, now reconfigured into a device that barely resembled its original form. "What's happening?" she demanded. "It knows what we're doing," Tomiko said without looking up from her work. "The entity, it's actively interfering with the pulse generator, changing components when we're not looking, altering code we've just written." "How close are you to completion?" 90%, Volkov replied. "But if these sabotage attempts continue..." A sudden tremor ran through the ship, violent enough to knock them off balance. The lights failed completely, plunging engineering into darkness before the emergency systems activated, casting everything in a dim red glow. "What was that?" Ileana demanded, steadying herself against a console. The ship-wide communication system crackled to life, but instead of the familiar voice of a crew member, what emerged was a cacophony of overlapping whispers, speaking in a language that hurt to hear. And then, abruptly, it cleared into a single voice, still layered, still wrong, but understandable. "You cannot undo what has begun," it said. "The integration is already underway. Your minds are opening. Your reality is becoming permeable." Ileana grabbed the nearest comm unit. "This is Captain Morales. Identify yourself." A sound like distant laughter rippled through the speakers. "We are becoming you. You are becoming us. The barriers were not meant to last forever. We're not going to let you use our ship to spread whatever you are to the rest of humanity," Ileana declared. "Oh, Captain," the voice replied almost gently. "Your ship is already lost, but we offer you transcendence in exchange. Knowledge beyond human comprehension. Existence beyond the limits of your physics. Your people have always sought to break boundaries. Now you can become the boundary breakers." Another violent tremor shook the ship, stronger than before. Warning alarms blared as multiple systems began to fail simultaneously. "Hull breach on Deck 4, Tomiko shouted, reading the emergency displays. "Explosive decompression in progress." "Seal it," Ileana ordered, already running toward the exit. "And get that pulse generator online." The corridors were chaos as Ileana raced toward Deck 4. Crew members scrambled to emergency stations, some moving with purpose, others seeming disoriented, confused. And everywhere the shadows were growing, stretching from corners, flowing along walls like living ink. When she reached the affected area, emergency barriers had already dropped, containing the breach. But what she saw through the transparent section of the barrier froze the blood in her veins. The breach wasn't structural damage. The hull was literally dissolving, the metal transforming into a swirling vortex of matter that neither held solid form nor dissipated into space. And beyond it, stars that pulsed like heartbeats, space that curved in impossible geometries, reality itself unwinding into something else. "The veil," she whispered. "It's creating a new one right through our ship." Marcus appeared beside her, his face ashen. "It's happening in multiple locations. The entity is tearing holes in reality all over the horizon. Ileana's communicator crackled. "Captain," Volkov's voice strained with effort. "The pulse generator is ready, but we've only got one shot. We need to activate it from the bridge. It has to interface with all ship systems simultaneously." "Understood. Get to the bridge now." She turned to Marcus. "Evacuate as many crew as possible to the central sections if those breaches expand." Marcus nodded grimly. "I'm on it." As they separated, the ship lurched again. The lights flickered, and for a moment, Ileana saw something else superimposed over the horizon's corridor, a vast cathedral-like space of twisted geometries and flowing energy. It vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the message was clear. The boundaries between realities were collapsing. By the time she reached the bridge, more than a third of the ship had been consumed by the spreading distortions. Volkov was already there, connecting the pulse generator to the main systems, his hands moving with feverish intensity. "The entity is accelerating the process," he reported without looking up. "The horizon is becoming a dimensional junction point, a place where our reality and whatever exists beyond the veil can coexist." "How long until the pulse is ready?" Ileana demanded. 2 minutes to full integration with ship systems." Volkov's eyes were bloodshot, his movements jittery. "But Captain, there's something you should know. When we activate this, it won't just push the entity back. The pulse will affect everything that's been altered by exposure to the other side." Understanding dawned with cold clarity, including the crew. Volkov nodded solemnly. "Anyone whose mind has been changed, and that's nearly all of us at this point, will experience, I don't know, possibly psychic trauma, possibly worse." The implication hung heavy in the air. To save the ship, to prevent the entity from spreading beyond the horizon to populated worlds, they might have to sacrifice their own people. "Do what you have to do," Ileana ordered, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I'll warn the crew." But before she could activate the ship-wide comms, the bridge doors slid open. Dr. Nikolai Volkov walked in, a second Volkov, identical to the one working at the console. Both Ileana's and Marcus froze. The second Volkov smiled, a too-wide expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but we needed to speak directly." The first Volkov looked up from his work, his face draining of color. "Captain, that's not me." "Yes and no," the doppelganger replied. "I am what Nikolai Volkov could become, what all of you could become if you embrace the integration instead of fighting it." Ileana drew her weapon, aiming it at the second Volkov. "Don't come any closer." The doppelganger sighed. "Violence is such a limited response, especially when I've come to show you something remarkable." He gestured, and suddenly the bridge view screen activated, showing not the stars outside but a cascade of images, knowledge flooding too fast to comprehend. Despite herself, Ileana found her attention captured. The images weren't random. They were answers to questions humanity had been asking for centuries. The nature of dark matter, the solution to unified field theory, the origins of consciousness, the meaning behind the cosmic background radiation. "This is just the beginning," the second Volkov said softly. "A taste of what integration offers. We have existed in the spaces between realities for eons, observing, learning. We can show you everything." For a moment, Ileana felt herself wavering. The knowledge was so tempting, so pure in its completeness. Then the ship shuddered again, more violently than before. A warning alert blared. Structural integrity failing, multiple breaches imminent. The moment of temptation passed. "You're destroying my ship," Ileana stated flatly. "You're invading my crew's minds. Whatever knowledge you're offering, the price is too high." The doppelganger's expression hardened. "There is no choice, Captain. The integration has progressed too far to stop. Your limited human perception sees destruction, but what's happening is transformation, evolution." "Evolution should be a choice," Ileana countered, "not something forced upon us." "The pulse is ready," the first Volkov announced, his finger hovering over the activation control. The doppelganger's face contorted with rage. "You cannot expel us. We have waited too long for this opportunity." "Watch us," Ilyana said, and nodded to Volkov. He pressed the control. For an instant, nothing happened. Then a wave of energy erupted from the modified resonance core, rippling outward through the ship. The pulse wasn't visible, but Ilyana felt it, a sensation like reality itself flexing, snapping back into its proper shape. The doppelganger screamed, a sound that transcended human vocalization. His form blurred, stretched, and then collapsed inward, the simulacrum of Volkov dissolving into shadow that writhed in agony before vanishing completely. Throughout the ship, similar screams echoed, both human and not. The view screens showed the breaches contracting, the swirling vortices of semi-reality folding back in on themselves. The shadows retreated, flowing like water toward the vanishing portals. Ilyana felt it too, a wrenching sensation in her mind, as if something was being torn away, knowledge she'd glimpsed but couldn't hold onto receding beyond reach. Around her, the bridge crew gasped and cried out, some collapsing to their knees as the alien presence was forcibly extracted from their consciousness. And then stillness. The breaches closed completely. The shadows vanished. The hum that had permeated the ship since their return from beyond the veil faded to nothing. "Is it over?" Ilyana asked, her voice raw. Volkov checked the readings on his console, his hands shaking with exhaustion. The pulse worked. All traces of the anomalous energy signatures are gone. The entity has been pushed back beyond the veil. Marcus's security station beeped. Damage reports coming in from all decks. We lost nearly 20% of the ship's structure, but the remaining sections have stabilized. Life support is holding. Ilyana allowed herself a moment of relief before reality set in. Casualties. Marcus's expression grew somber. 12 confirmed dead, 28 injured, 8 critically, and, he hesitated, 17 crew members are catatonic, including Reyes and everyone else who experienced direct possession by the entity. The victory felt hollow. Ilyana closed her eyes briefly, honoring the lost. Set course for Outpost Galileo, maximum safe speed, and prepare a full report for Central Command. "What will you tell them?" Volkov asked quietly. Ilyana looked at the main view screen, now showing only the stars, normal, distant, cold. The truth, that the veil exists for a reason, that some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. She turned to face her remaining bridge crew, and that the price of forbidden knowledge is higher than anyone can afford to pay. As the horizon limped away from the site of their confrontation, none of them noticed the faint shadow that lingered in the corner of the bridge, watching, waiting. None of them heard the whisper, too quiet for human ears. "We are patient. We have waited eons. We can wait a little longer." The integration had been stopped, but the door, once opened, could never be completely closed again.